Oh, that's not an option. That's taped down. Perfect. All right. Well, after all of those fuck ups, let's go ahead. So today we're going to talk about interviewing, and let's go ahead and get started. So you might be asking yourself, who are these guys? Why can they tell us anything about interviewing in InfoSec? I'm Richard Wartortell. This is me. I run a reverse engineering team for Palo Alto Networks. June of last year, we were just me, and now we're more than 20 people. So we've done a ton of hiring in the last year, and we've had absolutely no attrition, and we have a lot of very, very good people. So I feel like we have some good insight into actually hiring in InfoSec. And this is my final form if I ever get there.
So my name is Aaron, or at Alex Rogan. I've been doing InfoSec for about 20 years. What's interesting is 2015 was the first year in 20 years I was out of a job. I was out of a job twice in 2015. And so I ended up going through interviewing with 11 companies in 5 weeks. So I went through a lot of this from the interviewee side, and lots of bad mistakes, lots of good things. And so just kind of wanted to kind of counterpoint what Wartortell's talking about from the interviewee side.
So what's the point of this talk? Why are we doing this? We've seen a lot of poorly handled interviews. From my side, I've seen a ton of really people not doing any preparation in the interview process, not actually thinking about what they want to interview for, just like, oh, we'll interview him. I'll ask him some questions. It'll be fine. Doesn't really work out. We've also learned a lot from, all of Alex's experiences recently with all of the interviews he's gone through. So we wanted to provide some insight. And then on top of that, right now, InfoSec is kind of in a transition period a little bit. Our field is somewhat normalizing. There's actually a lot of people on the market for once. It's not a market where you can just walk in and be like, hack shit, give me a job. And they'll be like, sure, hired, that's great. It's not exactly how it is anymore. You actually have to work with this. You'll have competition. So we wanted to give some insight and give you some better ways to go about interviewing. Also, just some preparation. I decided that this talk is going to have inspirational photos, so get ready.
Yeah. So starting off, your first step is getting your resume, getting who you are to the right person. As Richard said, we are kind of in like a tipping point now. There actually are competition for the job that you want. You're not just going to be able to say, I've done this for 10 years. I go, great, have a job. There's going to be 5 of you with 10 years of experience all going for the same job. So you're going to have to stand out. You're going to have to show them that you know what you know, not just from a good resume. Also, when we talk about your resources and your resume, don't just think of that Word document that you update twice a year. Think about your GitHub. Think about your Stack Overflow. Chances are, if you're active in the community, you're doing more things than just keeping your resume up to date. So link those in there. They need to be part of the whole of who you are, because you're going to have to stand out amongst these other 5 or 10 people going for the same job. So we're all smart people. We try to be smart people. One of the things that you don't want to do is when you go into looking for a job, you identify either the company, the job, the industry, the area. Do your research, do your recon on it. Look up if it's a publicly traded company, look at their SEC filings, find out if they've been making money. If they've been losing money, probably not going to be a good choice for a high-paid information security job. If they're a privately held company, look who their investors are, see what they're doing, look online, see all the stuff, get all the information that you can that's freely available, so when you do go into the interview, you can actually ask them intelligent questions about that, which kind of raises your capital as an interviewee, saying, hey, this person actually gets what we're talking about. They know a little bit about who we are. So let's talk about the order of operations here. There is a right and a wrong way to get a job. This was me in December of 2015. This was 2 weeks before Christmas when I got my last job failure notice thing. So I went out and I scattershotted the entire world with resumes and applications because I was desperate for a job. And so all this is going to do, while it worked for Alex Rogan in the movies, it's not going to work for you. You're going to spend all your energy and time. You're going to feel like crap from all the rejection you're going to get going after the wrong jobs in the wrong way. So don't do this. Your friends should be your first line of contact when you want a new job. your friends are going to be either working in the field that you want to, the job that you want to, or the company that you want to. Talk to them first. Find out what the job looks like, what the company looks like. Maybe you've got a false impression of it, or maybe you don't know how awesome that company actually is. So talk to your friends. Give them your resume. A lot of people, myself included, had this idea of, if I give somebody my resume, that I'm like owing them something for this, because they're representing you. And in a way, there is kind of like a friendship thing there. But here's the key thing. If your friend puts in your resume and you get hired from that, your friend's probably going to get a check from their company for bringing in a referral. So lots of companies do this. Don't feel bad about using your friends, as long as they're cool with it too, to put your resume out there. Use your friends. They know people. So next step, Twitter. If you're in information security, you really should be aware of what's going on in Twitter. Companies are always posting about jobs, needs, struggles, clients, things like that, probably more than they should in some cases, but use that information. Look up specific hashtags for the company that you're going for. Look at the different roles in the area. I actually ended up getting the job that I am right now thanks to a connection that was, a lot of it was through Twitter. Somebody that I had known on Twitter for a while didn't realize the company that they worked at was hiring. And so just working your connections, again, friends, Twitter, really closely together, they're gonna pay off for you. So ninja jobs, job boards that are specifically focused to information security jobs exist and are proliferating. The cool thing about these things is that they don't just let anybody with a credit card post jobs there. They actually do vet the jobs and vet the opportunities, so that you know that whenever you're going to these sites, they're more reputable than than like your Monster, your Dice, or things like that. So look at these specific jobs and look for focus in on, again, we're kind of going from the most desirable to the least, but this is definitely, way up there. And on that note, this is Rob. This is Mubix. He's been doing a really cool thing at conferences for the last couple of years, is he'll actually put a call out for companies to put together a list of companies that are hiring that want to interview you and talk to you at this next conference. So last time I checked, there were about 31, companies at DerbyCon this weekend looking to hire people. So great opportunity to kind of go through a people that know people, the whole web of trust concept, but in this case, talking about security jobs. So definitely check this out. Go look and see. Lots of cool people on this list. Another fun place, subreddits. So if you put the plug, there we go. Yeah, we're all together now. We're all awake. So there are a lot, obviously tons of stuff on Reddit for specifically information security, jobs, industry, regions, things like that. It's a source of information. And if you get bored, there's lots of really cool cat pics on there, and various other stuff. So either way, you're going to be, entertained by it. So networking. We're all in this room together. We're all at this conference together. We're all networking, whether you know it or not. We come to cons to speak, to network, to find out what's going on in the industry. People like Richard are here looking for candidates for jobs as well. So this is a great environment to show up to and to talk to people, but not just this con. Think about local things like user groups or brown bags or meetups or birds of a feather meetups where you live. It doesn't have to be Infosec. I've gotten great connections with people from programming conferences, from, like I said, Linux user groups, security user groups. So don't just limit yourself to thinking, well, I've got to go to Derby or Hush or DEF CON or GERCON or whatever. Anything where like-minded people congregate, you want to be there, getting your name out there, talking to people, and hey, have a resume with you, have it handy, ready to go for you on that. And then once you actually winnow down, you go from your friends to Twitter, to job boards, to Reddit. Now you've actually got the job you want to go for ready in hand. You've got your resume primed, all of your GitHub, all of your Stack Overflow, all of your really cool stuff that makes you the unique snowflake that you really are is ready to go out there. However, just be wary. You're going to apply for a job, and sometimes this is going to be the person that receives it. So give them a break. They've got a lot of things to go through. So make sure that within a reasonable amount of time, maybe within a week or so, follow up. Don't be the pushy every 2 hours, what's the word kind of thing. But also don't let it fall by, because you want to make sure that this guy wakes up at some point to process your application. So I'm going to hand it back over to Richard.
So next, on the other side of things, as a company, we need to use the exact same order of operations. We need to go and use referrals first. That's the first. I put this in there because that's all I could think that guy was thinking. We use our friends first. Like, referrals are your best source of finding new people. My whole team, every single one of the people on there has been by referral. We haven't had to source anybody. We have just gone through friends and found very, very good people. On top, after that, going to Twitter, going to job boards, that needs to be the exact same order of operations, because that's how you're going to get good people. So let's talk about how you present yourself and what you're going to do when you actually go for this job and you're putting your resume together. You have to think about the image that you're presenting and the information that you're presenting. So this is Brad. Brad's super excited. Brad's very proud. He's done a lot of things, and he really wants to tell you about them, because Brad's a CISSP, and he's super proud because that's a really hard cert, and you should be super proud of it. And he's a CEH, and a GCIA, and a Derpy, and a Grem, and all and a boop, and a turd, and a flirp, and a butts. He's got all of these certs, and he has them listed right on his resume because that he thinks they're just the best things ever. The problem is Brad's interviewing with this guy. This dude doesn't give any shits about any of those certs. This guy wants to hear about what you've broken into, vague descriptions of the engagements that you've done, things like that. He doesn't care about certs. However, so then Brad has a sad because Brad doesn't get his job and he's really sad. However, if Brad's interviewing with this dude loves certs because this is a Govy bro, and Govy bros love certs because they have boxes they have to check. Now, I know I'm ranting a little bit, but this isn't really me saying certs are bad or good. The point is, you need to play to your audience. The company that you're trying to get a job at, dependent on that company, they're going to be looking at different things on your resume. So make sure that you are playing towards that. You have to understand certain companies will love certs. Certain companies will love descriptions of projects. Certain companies will love descriptions of engagements. You have to play towards what you're going for. If you have a very academic looking resume, that's not going to play well for like a red team or something like that. You have to think about these things before you put that together. So I want to talk a little bit about recruiting just quickly. Recruiters in general are slightly a double-edged sword. There's basically two kinds of recruiters. I'm generalizing, but deal with it. There's internal recruiters and external recruiters. So the problem with external recruiters that you'll deal with is that if you have like a recruiting agency handling the sourcing for you, every person that they find, they're going to be like, this dude's hot shit. You should hire him. It's amazing. Hire him immediately. And the problem is, it's not always true. In fact, the majority of the time, it's not true. The reason this happens is recruiters that are external are paid on commission. Usually the way they work is they get a percentage of the first year's salary of the person that they place. And because of that, they want to place as many people as fast as possible. And it doesn't really matter if they're the best. I mean, obviously, they'll get used more if they source good people, but that doesn't seem to be how they work. So that's what you get with external recruiters. With internal recruiters, they're not paid on commission, so they're not necessarily security people. They don't know what you're looking for. So with internal recruiters, they don't know how to source the people a lot of the time that you're really looking for. So when you're dealing with recruiters, the best advice I can give you is put together all of the information that you need to see on a resume or that you would be interested in. For me, I'm looking for reverse engineers and people that do malware analysis. So I have keywords that are very important. Like, I want to see GitHub, I want to see IDA Pro, I want to see C and Python. Like, these are the things that I need in order for somebody to succeed on my team. You put together that list so that recruiter can succeed in terms of what they give you. So now let's talk about actually putting together an interview. Preparation for an interview is the biggest failure that I see in the whole process. Nobody wants to actually do any prep work, and I understand that. It takes a little bit of time, but if you put in a little bit of effort, you're going to get better results. If you think about exactly how to interview and the different steps and kind of what you really want to get out of it, you can put together a little bit of a plan. So the way that I go about it is we do a phone screen, essentially weeding out, doing a little bit of tech questions and a little bit of culture questions just to see if I'd want to work with this person and if I think they're smart. Like, that's essentially what a phone screen is. It's to weed out anybody that I'm like, don't want to work with this person. After that, you'll set up a series of other interviews. Those are usually more heavy technical, with the cross-section of skills that you want to cover. So a different interview for maybe each skill you want to cover. I usually do a programming interview, a reversing interview, and like a malware knowledge interview. And then you maybe have something that's like a big picture interview, like you have a VP or whatever is in your company. Do something where they talk to you about like the company and where you're going. Mainly kind of like the sales pitch interview where you're like, you want to work here, that kind of thing. If you put together a little bit of a plan there and give each interviewer a goal of like what we need to get out of this interview, you get better results. So let's talk about the intro. This is another place I see a lot of failures in interviews. Just the introduction of the interview, like when you call up somebody and to interview them, calling them and saying, hey, I'm Richard from Palo Alto Networks. Tell me about TCP. It doesn't really work very well. It makes it really impersonal and you'll kind of come off as aloof. You want to actually have a discussion with a person. The best interviews I've ever had have been discussions. Like it was just a conversation where after it was over, I was like, oh, an hour passed. That was awesome. That's kind of what you want to go for. So have a conversation. When I screen somebody, I tell them my background and where I'm coming from and why I got into security so that they understand that I'm excited about this stuff and why I do this. And then I ask them to do the same. I've read their resume, obviously, but I still want to hear them say it because it'll tell me something about them. And then you'll go into actual tech questions and different things like that. So you also want to ask questions when you're asking tech questions or general questions that are about creativity and how people will handle situations. Don't ask straight knowledge-based questions. Like people can memorize things and it's pretty useless to you if you have somebody that can just memorize things. What you need is to ask questions where you find out if somebody can handle a situation that they're going to be thrown into in the job that they're going to do. So I like to ask some ridiculous questions that are more, hey, if I ask you something weird that you probably never thought of, how can you handle it? So I'm being told 5 minutes and I'm going to ignore him. I like to ask, I stole this question from Fuzzy Knob, actually. I ask a question that's name 10 things that you can do with a brick. It's a stupid question, but name 10 things. It's really hard, actually, because you think, oh, I'd build something. The wrong answer is I'd build something. I don't know anything else. The right answer is basically anything else. One of my favorite answers to this was I'd eat it. It's like, I would have never thought to say that. That's pretty awesome. I've also heard I'd grind it down and use it as ninja dust. Like, that's a cool answer. I like that. So just like if somebody will come up with stupid things to do, throw it, break something, like stupid things. How they handle a situation like that can tell you something about them. So next we have to talk about tech questions, obviously. I'm going to cover some possibilities for good and bad questions. I'm going to cover blue team, red team, and pen testing. If you want to hear some good and bad questions for other sources or for other fields, I'm happy to talk afterwards because we couldn't cover everything that we wanted to cover. I'm not above bribery. I have some coins from the Labyrinth CTF that just finished. So first person to yell, scream, or put up their hand. No, not yet. Of the one that I think is the best is Aaron is going to run and grab and hand you one of these. So first we'll start with blue team. What's the best one of these? Pros and cons of these different vendors. Have you written to improve detection for your company? Describe your ideal security product solution with infinite budget. This man says 2. I heard 3 from you. I need it. I like that answer, but that man already has a coin. I'm going to give it to her. Number 3 is actually my favorite one here. So the first one, naming pros and cons of different vendors, is not necessarily the best question because they may not have used them. A better question would be, hey, describe your favorite security vendor or like vendor that you've used and what they've added and like why you use them and why it was beneficial. What have you written to improve detection? That can be good, but not all blue team people are coders, so it might not necessarily fit for the person that you're interviewing. And the last one, it gets you some creativity. It allows somebody to ramble. Everybody that's probably used some product like Palo Alto Networks or whatever probably has been like, this is bullshit. I would do this differently. You probably have thought about these things. In reversing malware, I look at malware, I'm like, I think I would do this differently if I was evil. So asking them to tell you about that, it's a good thing. Ask them to give you some information about how they would design something. So, red team. Ideal malware for long-term engagement. Social engineer me to give you my phone number right now. In this environment, what vuln would you use? I heard 2 from this man immediately. No. I saw the hand back there, and he said 3, and no. That man. All right. Order of operations. Yeah. So in number 1 is I like, because your ideal malware. It's the question I just described. You've thought about this probably as you're red teaming. Like, what would you write in order to, get into an environment, persist, and not be detected? That's something that's important to red teamers a lot of the time. Social engineer me to give you my phone number right now. I disagree with that one, because you're putting somebody on the spot, and that can be great, but you can also come off as a dick for putting somebody on the spot like that. It's there's pros and cons to that one. And then in this specific environment, what vuln would you use? That's a very specific knowledge question. Better things are like, tell me about your favorite vuln and why it's cool. Like something like that, where you're getting somebody to tell you about something interesting. If they tell you about the most basic vuln, you're learning something from it. And then, who said it? All right, give him a coin. So for pen testing, Metasploit commands, pen testing a Bitcoin exchange, and then list these things. Similar stuff. Metasploit commands for crafting a PDF, very specific knowledge. They may not know it. Pen testing a Bitcoin exchange. It's interesting. They can think about it and probably give you some ideas. They probably thought about these things before. And then the last one is very specific knowledge. I don't even know how to answer that. That's a dumb question. And then lastly, with interviewing, you want to make sure that you're not repeating yourself. So make sure that there's no repetition and overlap in your interviewers. They need to come in with the list of questions that they want to ask, and they need to not be the same as the last person that interviewed. That makes you look dumb in general, and you're not getting any extra knowledge. So make sure that your interviewers go in with separate questions and even separate goals of like what they want to learn about this person's knowledge.
So to repeat, avoid repetition wherever possible.
So to conclude, don't give pass-fail questions. Don't ask like straight knowledge-based questions. Don't ask dictionary info questions. Like you want to ask creativity or like figure out how somebody thinks. You're going to get a better idea of how somebody's going to work in a job if you ask those kind of questions. And then make sure not to repeat. Make sure not to repeat. Yeah. So on the other side of things, let's talk about the people that are the like red flags that can happen in an interview. So this guy doesn't get a job. If you walk into an interview and you're like, yeah, it'd be cool. I honestly got the response when I asked, so why are you interested in Palo Alto Networks? The guy responded with, decent job, decent wages. And I was like, no, like, didn't want to talk to him whatsoever. You need to come off as passionate, like this is stuff that interests you.
So when you're coming in as an interviewee and the person across the desk from you props his feet up with his funky cool douche bro socks and his outfit, everything else, he's hitting his like vape pen that's the size of his arm while you're answering questions. He doesn't care. All he cares about is how cool he looks, how much hot shit he is, and he wants you to know how awesome he is. That's not the kind of company or the kind of person you want to work with. So at that point, if this is all about that person and his really cool socks, you probably should just walk away, save your energy for the next one.
Yeah, you want passion on both sides of the table for the work, essentially. This last one also came from a guy that I interviewed with, or that a friend of mine interviewed, and his interviewer came in board shorts, barefoot, put his feet up on the desk, started hitting his vape pen and talking about himself. Like, it doesn't come off very good. This guy also doesn't get a job. It's okay to say you don't know something. I would much rather have you say, I don't know, than, oh yeah, I know this, and then just like try to come up with an answer that's wrong. It's totally fine to say you don't know. Saying that coming up with an answer will come off as like, in a work situation, if you don't know something, you're going to try to lie your way through it. And that's not somebody that I want to work with. So just be okay with not knowing something. If you know everything, also don't be this guy. Be humble about it. Nobody wants to work with that dick that like knows everything and really wants to tell you it.
So this is probably my favorite one from my interviews. I was going through an interview, and the guy said, "Can I ask you some personal questions?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. Keep it, like PG-13 or whatever." But so he asked me, "What kind of do you play games?" I was like, "Yeah, I play video games." He goes, "What kind of games do you play?" I said, "Like co-op, I like Halo, and like Gears of War." And he's like, "What about Call of Duty?" I said, "Well, I'm not really a fan. I'm not the big PvP guy." He's like, "Well, I play Call of Duty," and he was like, "I find Call of Duty to be a really, apt, relationship between InfoSec and what's going on. So I'm really, it's kind of bumming me out. You don't play Call of Duty." And so I'm like, okay, whoa, man. When you get adversarial with the person in the interview, again, kind of a red flag. Also, this is the same person that told me with respect to infrastructure pen testing. He goes, you don't see Windows 98 boxes connected to the internet anymore without a firewall running remote desktop services. I mean, that is a literal word for word quote. So at that point, I was like, A, I'm not going to get this job. No way in hell. And B, probably really don't want to work with this guy because he and I are just going to be oil and water. So definitely great red flag for me to walk away from.
And also, never respond to a question with this. Don't say you could Google something. I specifically ask questions that I know that you can't Google because I don't want to hear this. It's useless to me. I don't ask like straight information questions. If you say this, it's never an appropriate answer because obviously we all have Google, we all have Stack Overflow, we all have these things. But I want to know what you know off the top of your head. So never respond with this. You come off as you don't. It kind of comes off as like a fuck you. Like that's kind of how it sounds anytime that you say that. I'm sorry to the small child in the front row. I just noticed that, and I feel like I about cussed again. I know, she's here, right? Finally. Probably here in the last half hour. So the last red flag, come with questions. Always be prepared to ask questions in an interview. The worst thing to do is in your first interview with somebody coming and saying, yeah, I don't have any questions. You should have a long list of things that you want to know about working at this place. It's important to come in with that. And then finally, be yourself. Like you have to want to work with the people that are interviewing you, and they need to want to work with you as well. So if you're filtering yourself down to nothing, it's not going to work out in 6 months when they figure out that you're a freaking weirdo, because we're all a little bit autistic in this field. So it's okay to be yourself a little bit because you want to figure out if the relationship and the culture fit is going to be good. If you're this guy, you probably don't want to work with Govy Bros. It's not going to work out. And with that, we will take any questions that you guys have. Or that this has cost. Take her coin back. Yep.
As an interviewer, how do you work through a question with someone who doesn't really know where to begin?
I tend to, if they don't know where to begin whatsoever, I'll try to give some leading answers or to like lead them to something where they might be a little bit more comfortable. And if it's still just a complete miss, then I will probably move on to something else. I mean, I usually have twice the number of questions that I can ask in an interview ready to ask, so that in that scenario, this isn't your field, that's fine. You don't know this, we move on to something that you may know. Because I want to, if I get nothing from the interview, I don't know that, I don't know this, I don't know, then it's useless to me. You might be great, and I just asked you the wrong question. So I just move on to something that you might know.
Do you use that particular image as an interview question?
This one?
Yeah.
I try to throw in my...
What's going on here? What do you see in this picture? What's happening?
I actually really like that, and I might use that instead of my brick question from now on.
How do you select, I'm assuming you have the person's future potential peers interviewing?
Yep.
How do you select the people that are allowed to do the interview? Or is there a certain type of person that might be a good or a bad person to have?
Sure. Sure. He's asking, how do you select the people that you have interview somebody other than like your initial screen? In general, I like to have a cross-section of skills, like I was saying. So I pick the people that are good at the skills that I want to have them interviewed for. So like I have somebody that's a good programmer interview for the programming skills. I have somebody, one of my, a very good RE interview for the reverse engineering skills, and so on and so forth. In general, the things you don't want to do, if you have like somebody that's hella autistic on your team, just don't ever have him interview anybody because the results are never good. There are people that you don't want to have interview. I thankfully don't have any on my team, but there are people internally in every company I've ever seen where I was like, no. And I've been in interviews where I was like, why the hell would you pick him to interview me? Like, this is like horrible language barrier. And then on top of that has no idea how to explain a problem. So it's, You want to pick somebody where the communication is going to be easy. Right here.
So do you rank or score people that you're interviewing? Like, how do you make a repeatable process so you know you're getting like the same thing?
So in terms of that, oh crap. Oh, sorry. And now it's bright colors. He's asking how we rank or score after an interview. In general, we don't have to as much, and I'm spoiled when it comes to this because everybody's been referral based. So it's either just like a no or a yes. And we actually have never had an offer turned down. So every time we've made an offer, it's been accepted. So there's not been like a serious process for that. In general, the best way to do it, in my opinion, from what I've experienced with at other jobs in general, is having a round table have the same people interview all of them, and then you pro and con all of them. Like you don't score them, but like you pro and con all of them with the same people, and then you see who everybody would want to work with the most. And you make sure that you have the people they would be working with as part of that roundtable.
Yeah, because we're actually scoring them.
Yeah.
And as a repeatable process.
Yeah.
And a follow-up question to that is, like, how many questions do you ask? Because we have a number of questions depending on the type of experience you have. So if you're new, maybe only have 5 questions.
Sure. In general, I find it hard to say things like you should have X number of questions and a scoring system from A to B, and because people aren't exactly scorable, in my opinion, like on such a strict basis. It's much more like if you line everybody up together, you're going to be able to be like, these are the ones I want to work with, like that. You'll be able to draw the delineation of like, throw these away and these are the ones that I want to work with. That tends to be better. Number of questions is tough. Like I said, I like a conversation for an interview. So I don't go in with like, I need to ask these questions. I go in with, I need to know if you will be able to do this job. That's more important to me. So I'd say number of questions is tough. Yeah, he's last because he's going to ask something dumb.
How do you tell when a red flag? How do you tell when a red flag is a sign of maybe a place you don't want to work versus just someone who's not a good interviewer?
Usually you'll be able to tell from the person that's in. He's asking, how do you tell the difference between a red flag that's a place you don't want to work and a bad interviewer? Usually the bad interviewer is going to be pretty obvious, but also it's an indication of if this dude's working there, maybe you don't want to work there. Like that's also potentially a thing. It's usually the bad interviewer that becomes obvious pretty quickly because, bad interviewers, they're pretty like ridiculous in terms of the things they'll ask. He'll be able to answer that better.
Questions from a manager, and that seems okay. But when you get to a peer interview, someone who's maybe never been in a peer interview asked me, "What kind of tree would you be?" Like,
Sure.
Real thing.
Yeah.
4 months ago.
So
Are you in a beauty pageant?
Right. Oh no, we're not going to go there. So yeah. I had the same problem with a lot of my interviews, and for me, it actually came across with a question of what was the confidence level of the person doing the interviewing. So the guy that asked me about my Call of Duty and video games, and I was an awful person because I don't do web app pen testing as a god. This guy was completely confident all day long. He knew what he was talking about. He had everything down. A nervous interviewer or somebody that's new to doing peer interviewing, they're generally not going to have that level of confidence. And so for me, that was kind of the cutoff of, well, okay, this person's asking me questions. I'm not really getting a good feel here, but I kind of feel like they may not have done this a whole lot. I mean, I've been interviewing a whole lot recently, so I'm kind of an expert on that one. And this person is not. So I give them, like the benefit of the doubt. And also, if there are other peer interviews involved and they're stronger, then I'm like, well, it's just that one person. They weren't on their game that day. But yeah, for me, it was a confidence level.
I have a question about resumes. What's significant on yours with the fraud?
Yeah. Actually, that boy was me.
Shorts?
If you hit a red flag early on, right? You're talking to someone and you know immediately that either this isn't the right person for the job or this isn't the right job for you. Do you continue the interview the whole way, or do you stop it early?
I actually go through the entire interview. Just because you hit a red flag, I mean, it could be like an IED level explosion, but
you never know what's going on. I always finish the interview for two reasons. One, I want to know what the rest of it is out there. I may be surprised. It's going to educate me for future interviewing and interviewees. So it's good to know. Plus, something might have just happened in what's going on with that person's life. And I always give them the benefit of the doubt. It's like, hey, I realize this is probably not going to work out, but I want to finish it out. And my wife can tell you when I finished up the interview with a Call of Duty dude, I was crushed and I cried myself to sleep in a fetal position in the closet that night. But I learned from it. Now I'm up here talking to you guys about this stuff. So, finish it up.
As the interviewer on the other side of that, though, when you hit a red flag like that, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. If it's something like they try to answer a question too hard and they don't actually know anything about it, move on to something else. You can cut off an interview short very easily. I've done that before. If it's a point of I'm now wasting your time and you're wasting my time. So
Tell them that?
no, I don't tell them that.
Why they're not the right fit?
Sure. I have had interviews where I've basically told a person, yeah, this isn't the right fit, and guided them towards what I thought might be the right fit for them. But it's tough to do that sometimes, and people don't accept that kind of criticism very well a lot of the time. So you have to kind of weigh whether or not you want to go about it that way. The other piece, in interviews, I try to educate. If somebody doesn't know something, I'll tell them the answer to it after I ask them, because at least they learn something from it. But in terms of cutting off interviews, the one thing I will say, even if you're in a series of interviews that a person is up for, if you have hit red flags and you're sure you're not hiring a person, cut off the interview sequence immediately. There's no need to have more interviews if you're just wasting people's time, because you're just time wasting. So you can just let them know that this isn't a good fit via email, or let your recruiter do it, or whatever. And cut, even if you're in the second interview out of 4 interviews that you've already scheduled, it's totally fine to knock that out. Any other questions? We're way over time, so we'll be at the bar and we'll buy you a drink. Thanks, guys.